Welcome to Serious Talk, the Military Minute. I'm your host, Greg Banks. We're all about helping veterans, active service members, and military spouses find their place in the Salesforce ecosystem through real success stories and practical resources. Grab your coffee and let's talk about how your military experience can be your secret weapon in the tech world. All right. Hello, Danielle Calabrese. Welcome to Serious Talk, a Military Minute. It's great to have you here today. I know we've been trying for a little while to get this book, but thanks for making time for us today.
Of course. I'm looking forward to it.
Awesome. So as you know, what we're trying to do here is create some content for military spouses or veterans who have not yet embarked or are beginning to embark on their journey to separate. And we want to encourage them, inspire them, give them some guidance based on the experience that some of our friends and family here at Sirius have been through. So I really would love for you to take a little bit of time. Tell us your story. Was there signs early on? Did you come from a military family? Tell us a little bit about your background that led you on this journey.
No, being a military spouse was not on my bingo card. I'll tell you that much. I don't have, I don't have any military family background or anything like that. My husband and I have been married for 20 years, which is crazy. I can't believe it's actually 20 years. How do I do that when I'm only 28? That's impossible. And he's been in the Navy that whole time since before we met. So it's been a long time. And I know we're going to talk a little bit about the challenges that military spouses face. Those are numerous when it comes to the career, but I will say, just kind of done a little reflection this week as I've been thinking about what we were going to talk about. And it is challenging. There are certainly challenges, but as we are coming up on that 20-year anniversary, I do reflect and kind of think, I am grateful for a lot of the opportunities that this life has given us. We've been able to live and travel to some amazing places, and we've met some great people. It's an amazing community, and our kids, we have 3 children, and their view of the world is different because of that. So I'm absolutely grateful for that. Yeah.
That's a great way to look at it. I think all of our lives are a sum of the experiences we've had, from our upbringing to our family, our roots, school life, whatnot. And I think we'll find part of the story we'll tell today is that you don't have to look at the things you didn't do as things that would hold you back. More as look at the things you have and you have been through and you have learned and figure out how to use those to your advantage and understand them. And so that's what I hear a lot in the veteran community is it's not a matter of I can't do things. It's I just don't know how to explain what I've been doing is relevant to what I want to do.
Yeah.
So we'll dig into that as we go, but great. Let's articulate some of those challenges that you talk about. There's probably a dozen or more we could easily get into, but if you think about your specific story early on, right? Maybe at the very beginning of your marriage, if he was in the military before you got married, you probably had your own plans, but now you're married to a veteran and you've kind of become a passenger in your own family. Like you're going where the military says you're going to go. And what did that feel like? What was some of the early challenges you faced?
You're right. There are a number of challenges that military spouses face. Specific to me, when we first got married, we were actually stationed in Germany, in Wiesbaden, and I was working at the time. And I was actually working remotely for a company in the UK, but my company was bought out. I was laid off and I found myself without employment, living in Germany, not speaking German. And I will say, actually, when I was living there at that point, we were just engaged. And so I couldn't even get a job on the base if I wanted to do that. And so then once we got married, there's only so many, the government service level jobs available. And I didn't have any experience in that realm. I didn't know what I was going to do. I even actually applied for an internship while I was there with a German company, and they wouldn't hire me because they were confused. They said, well, you're too qualified to do this job. So I couldn't even qualify for a job that I was overqualified for. I couldn't get that. And so that was really difficult. And then around that time, we decided to start a family. So then, the timing kind of worked out. I was thinking, okay, well, I'll have this time. And, we had our oldest and then 1 year turned into 3 years, which turned into 2 children, which turned into 4 years and another child. And then 10 years had gone by. And all of a sudden, I felt like I blinked and 15 years had passed. And the kids were more independent. I had a little more time than maybe I did have before, and I was ready to go back to work. But the frequent moves, raising a family, needing the flexibility that having being married to a service member requires, those are all huge challenges, and they present real issues. Not to mention the fact that when you are a military spouse, the focus really is on your spouse's career and the needs of whatever branch of service they are in. And so your needs kind of, as far as your career goes, take a backseat, and time goes quick. And I actually came from I worked in tech before, and technology in particular moves really, really, really quick. And so all of a sudden, I had a huge break in my resume, and the world had kind of moved on without me, and I didn't know how to make my way back in. Yeah, it was
So
I was flummoxed.
I'm doing some quick math here, but you said you've been married roughly 20 years, and
Yeah.
15 years in is when you kind of had that moment where, all right, my kids, they don't need me all day every day now, so I'll start looking again. We're around 2020. We're around that time of COVID. So I'm just thinking back to all of a sudden remote work became a thing. And I'm wondering, just overall in your journey, how much opportunity was afforded, because the worldview on remote work at that point just had to change, right? We all became passengers of what that virus took us through. So
yeah, it certainly adjusted. You know, we lived in a world all of a sudden where the kids could work from home. and,
yeah.
And so, and people were working from home a lot more. And there were jobs, the job that I had previously, I traveled a lot. And so I worked remotely. But I feel like those jobs were kind of more few and far between. But all of a sudden, I think people's eyes were open to the possibility of, oh my gosh, maybe I don't have to live in the place where I work. And I think in particular for military spouses, that's a big deal, because and we had talked about, those moves are frequent and they can be long, and they can be in areas of the country or the world where employment on the economy, as we call it, isn't a possibility, or, it just isn't going to work. There's nothing suitable.
Yeah.
So remote work, I think, is huge. It certainly was huge for me.
Yeah. Well, say what you want about the virus, but that knocked down one of the barriers to entry for you, right?
Mm-hmm.
You needed to find something that would be remote.
Yeah.
We've talked a little bit about, just in our background talks here, that you almost talk yourself into settling for a job because the idea of a career when you're a military spouse seems unreachable. You rarely find a base in greater Chicago or Atlanta or New York City.
Yeah.
You're generally out of sight, out of mind. Bases don't want to be near where people pay attention to what's going on, which by nature is going to limit the kind of opportunities generally you would find if you're not working remote. Even if you are working remote, how do you get to those places to interview? Again, I think the 2020, the pandemic definitely gave you options to have remote interviews and have remote work be an option. So that knocked one of those things down. Do you recall, as you're having that aha moment that 15 years have passed, if I'm ever going to go back to work, I probably need to do it now? Were you cataloging fears and challenges, or were you just looking as hard and as far and wide as you could for options?
Yeah.
Just to kind of, how do you plan that? Where do you start?
Yeah, you definitely do. And there's a lot to it. And the biggest thing I think for me was, I was the constant. I was the one at home all of the time. And I was the one that the school called if someone needed to be picked up because they were sick. I was helping with homework. And just because of the nature of my husband's job gave him less flexibility. And so the guilt, starts to creep in as you think, oh, geez, I'm not, if I go back to work, am I going to be around anymore? Or am I going to be able to be around? And what if someone does need me and I'm not there? And then the doubt starts to creep in, because you think, I've been out for so long. Who's going to want to take a chance on me at this point? What can I do? And I think we talked about before, I had met with another military spouse when we were stationed in Washington, D.C. just for coffee. We'd moved to the area at the same time. And we had planned to have a quick coffee. We spent 2 hours lamenting, sadly. And I wish the story wasn't so common that you could bump into someone that happened to move into the same neighborhood as you, and they were struggling with the exact same situation as you were. But it's a really common story.
Well, and I think that's one of the reasons we're doing these podcasts, right? You can have commonality, but it doesn't have to be a bad thing, right?
Yeah.
We see now that remote work is more the norm. We see that tech options for learning things for free. You don't have to go to college and get a 4-year degree and have that thing on your life.
Yeah.
That makes what you could have very likely gotten to 15 years and said, now I have to go get a 4-year degree and put you back another 4 years. And so what good would that have done? So I think this is it's a great aha moment to just kind of catalog what's going on and not just get in the self-doubt of what you were telling yourself. But now you've got a peer that's at a similar station, literally, pardon the pun, but finding those barriers accumulating and start working through them together. Do you remember specific obstacles, like as you actually started looking, started applying, started researching? Do you remember one or two that stood out as like just I don't really know how to face this. I'm going to kind of ignore it and just press forward, and if it comes up, so be it.
Yeah. So one, I knew that I talked about being the constant. I needed something that allowed me some flexibility because of the lack of flexibility in my husband's job. So that was one obstacle. The other thing was that I knew I needed something that could move with me. So if we were going to have to PCS again, which is inevitable, it's not if, it's when. And I needed something that was going to be able to not only move with me, but also with an employer that understands this life and the challenges that it brings. And just has a little sympathy or at least empathy for that. And then I needed to gain some skills that also would be just as valuable in one location as it would in another. And so when you look around and you Google, because you do spend a lot of time Googling, what can I do? What can I do that's flexible? What can I do that's remote? There are plenty of training programs that will offer to give you a certificate for just $5,000.
Right.
And I needed that wasn't an option for me. And I wasn't willing to invest in something like that when I just wasn't sure that was going to be the right option. So, those were really big obstacles, something that would be flexible, something that would move with me, and something that I could gain skills in that would be valuable anywhere.
Yeah. I think the story I continue to hear with military spouses, it just feels like the grand frontier, right? When it doesn't matter if you were out of the market for 2 years or 20, when you step back into it, it feels like the whole world is your oyster. I mean, I can do anything, which means I can do anything. Like, where do I start? Right. So, so you eventually settled on Salesforce. So that could probably be a full episode by itself. But let's talk about how you came to understand the word Salesforce, what it means, and how did you find your way back onto that trail?
So Salesforce for me, it actually ended up being a full circle moment. In the job that I had been doing before, we had considered years before Salesforce as a vendor for a CRM platform that we were looking into. As it turned out at the time, because it was years ago, the specific business model that we had it wasn't a good fit. Salesforce wasn't nearly as flexible as it is now back then. So I had heard of Salesforce before. And so then fast forward years later, in these gaps in my career during that time, I'd actually started a couple of businesses. I'd done some web design. I had started like a seasonal toy kit, e-commerce company website. And as part of that, actually, I was looking for a professional network locally. And I stumbled across the Military Spouse Professional Network. And through that, I discovered Hiring Our Heroes, which is a US Chamber of Commerce Foundation, which helps to prepare military spouses and veterans as they seek to either enter or re-enter the workforce. And so through Hiring Our Heroes, that was where I discovered Salesforce and the Salesforce Fellowship Program. Yeah.
Good deal. So, and you're stateside at this point, right? This is when you were outside of DC. Okay. Talk to me a little bit about what that fellowship was for you. I know a little bit about the program, obviously. You were one of the first fellows I was able to meet and manage, but I always want to hear the other side of it. Tell me how you came to find out. And I know it's a program that's changed since you went through.
Yeah.
But what was applying like? How much time did you need to be available to go through the rigors of what it offered? How did you find out about companies to interview with? Tell me a little bit about starting into that.
Well, I knew initially the biggest hurdle for me was that I had to get my Salesforce administration certification. And so that's where you think, oh, geez, okay, well, get ready. Here's the $5,000 certificate I was talking about, right? But it turns out Salesforce Military is a huge support for military spouses of veterans, and Trailhead, which is the Salesforce training platform, provides free training, and through Salesforce Military, free certification. So that for me was huge, because all of a sudden I was confronted with a program where the only investment I needed to make was my time. And at that point, my husband was actually deployed for a year. So you would think I didn't have much time on my hands. But it was one of those moments, because I think you go through these periods where you go, not yet, not yet. I'm not going to be able to do this yet. I'll wait until the next PCS. I'll wait until he retires. And that's when I'll start investing in myself. But it occurred to me that you can do this now to prepare yourself, so you're not starting from scratch when you're ready to make the jump. So with a deployed spouse at that point, I didn't think returning to the workforce was going to work for me in that moment. I had too much going on. But it allowed me to be prepared for the moment where I was ready to take that step. And so Salesforce Military and Trailhead was huge for that. And then combined with the support of the Hiring Our Heroes Fellowship, I mean, it was a match made in heaven, basically. And
you had to make excuses not to do it at that point.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah. And I think that's one of the beauties of Trailhead. There's a lot of training programs. And I think back to the different types of schooling I've been through the years. Like you need blocks of hours, right, to go and go to a class or go do this study. Trailhead, you literally can do it 10 minutes at a time, 20 minutes at a time. Yeah. It modularizes the training material and breaks it down into segments that you sign in, you do your 10 minutes or 30 minutes or 2 hours, whatever you want to do. Right. And when you get done and leave and come back, it knows where you left off and you pick right up. So,
and not just
that, it kind of turns it into a game. You get points and badges. It does. Things that trick our brains into, oh, that was fun. Let's go do some more of that.
It does. And then, if you're extra curious and you want that additional practice, you can set up playgrounds. And, if you're more of a hands-on learner, you can play and you can work on building things out in a Salesforce playground. So it's not necessarily just the standard computer-based training where you're reading, trying to digest, and so rereading. It's actually a more interactive platform. So that was huge.
Good point. Do you recall from the time you actually started until you passed the exam, how much time did it take you?
Oh my gosh, I think it was a quick turnaround. I think I discovered Salesforce, the Salesforce Fellowship Program. I think I discovered in the summer. I think it would have been maybe July. I think it may have been June or July. And I knew that to qualify for the fellowship, I at least needed my Salesforce Administrator certification. And the deadline for that was September. And so for that particular cohort. So I worked and carved time out and studied consistently. And there are lots of resources available to help with that as well. Passed the exam in the September, which I was actually floored because I didn't expect to pass it first time. Yeah, I didn't expect to pass it first time. And so it felt like a huge achievement. And it was a big confidence boost as well, because you remember I talked a little bit about that doubt. Can I do this? And, all of a sudden there's something on your screen that's firing confetti off and giving you congratulations. That's telling you, actually, yeah, you can. Look, you just did.
I don't know what I did, but it feels good. Yeah. I mean, I think when I started in the ecosystem, Trailhead did not exist. I got into the ecosystem in 2011. I think I got my first certification in 2020. So I was in almost 10 years before I got around to doing that. But so chopping down these blocks, right? You find out about Salesforce, you go get your admin cert, you apply to Hiring Our Heroes to get into that cohort. Have you even stopped to think, I don't really know what this means? Like I know what Salesforce is, but am I getting certified to be a user? Like admin certification implies you're an admin. Like, oh right. God, I'm going to be an IT, right? So there's a lot. Yeah. Had you researched what the Salesforce frontier, on the technical side was going to mean? Or are you making decisions based on a path you want to get on, or you're just like, this seems like a really good door to kick open and I'll find out what's on the other side when I get there?
Yeah, I think the nice thing about Salesforce is that there is a big community of people, and within that community, there are lots of people that are willing to provide support. There's community groups, there are mentors, there's books that have been written on, possible career paths. There's a lot of resources out there. So I was able to do that research and think, okay, this is the route I think that I would like to follow. I think I would like to follow this consultant route. That's, I think, where I want to be. But part of getting there is a whole new world that opens up, because that means, no, I have to do an interview, and I have to write my resume, and all of these things start occurring to you, and wait, I don't think I even have a LinkedIn account. I have to brand myself and try and market myself on LinkedIn now. And so, those were all big things that all of a sudden I realized I had to figure out. And someone said, oh yeah, and don't forget, have that elevator pitch down. I'm like, wait, what? And so those were all a little daunting, but there are so many resources available to military spouses and veterans to help with that. I remember doing interviews through a service called Canderful, who help military spouses and service members through mock interviews. And so, believe it or not, those are just as nerve-wracking as regular interviews, but about 4 interviews in, and these are just volunteers from different companies. I think someone at Amazon maybe interviewed me, someone at Nike, I think, interviewed me. They just volunteer their time to help conduct these mock interviews, to kind of help you get that muscle memory, so that when you're ready to do an actual interview, you are not so nervous that you can't even listen to anything that's being said to you. You're actually able to have that conversation.
Right.
That's really important in interviews.
Help you shake the dust off.
It's a two-way thing.
Yeah,
it really does. And then there's another program that I had used called Hire Heroes USA, not Hiring Our Heroes. This is another one, who it's a free service that helps you with your resume. And that's particularly important for service members, because translating that experience into the regular world can be challenging. But also, military spouses do a lot of volunteering. We find ourselves in that position frequently, and we start our own businesses because we need to do something. And they really help to translate that experience into something that was meaningful. And so really great resources out there. As daunting as the task seemed to be, all of a sudden I was presented with all of these things that were available to me to help me on the journey. And it was really, really, really helpful.
Yeah, that's remarkable. When we're done, we need to catalog all of these resources you've mentioned by name and put links to those in the show notes. Again, when you just go look, what help is there for a military spouse, or what transition resources are for a veteran, there's thousands upon thousands. And to your point, they're not all legit. They're not all ethical. There's some that just want to get your money. So we want to make sure we're promoting those that are tried and tested and true, and we know we've seen success through them. You mentioned volunteer work. I know in talking to the handful of military spouses that we have here at Sirius, it was just an eye-opening thing for me. I've had a passion for doing something for veterans for a very long time. I got to admit, what the military spouses go through in that regard, other than the fact that they're just going to be flying around the world wherever their spouse is deployed. I didn't put a whole lot of thought into the fact that they didn't have a career, or even a job for that matter. But my eyes have completely been open to that here, and understanding that I actually worked on a military base in high school back in groceries. In that little town, when the base was there, was not dense, but over 50 years from the time that base had been built, the city had sprawled and kind of enveloped it. So there were things nearby, there were options. But if you manage to find something there, maybe even get lucky and you like it, when you get redeployed, the odds of that being wherever it is you go next are slim to none. And even if it's a job that's there, a job that might be open, like you said, those are all limited things.
Right.
As you think through those 15 years, and maybe even since you've gotten here, were there things that you had been responsible for as a military spouse that actually wound up being skills that have served you well since coming into the Salesforce space?
Yeah, I think that was one of the big things that I learned through this process is that your experience has value. You bring with you, aside from any certifications that you've managed to gain, you bring resilience, you bring adaptability, you are a problem solver, you are a leader, and those are all skills that are really highly valued by employers. And they're not easy to find. They're not as easy as you think. When you're sitting there and you're thinking, who's going to take a chance on me? What can I possibly offer? You have to understand that your story matters and there is a way to frame it confidently. And so really I think make that shift from feeling like you're starting over to making that journey strategic. And so the skills I think, and I know I'm biased, but the skills that I think that military spouses bring are numerous and valuable and should not ever be discounted.
I couldn't agree more. My background's engineering. That's what my degree's in. And I spent a lot of years traveling doing field service work. And one thing we did at the end of every project was we came in, we sat amongst our peers. We had a staff meeting every 6 weeks. And anybody who completed a project in that preceding 6 weeks had to stand up and do a lessons learned. What did I do? What was the nature of the project? What went right? What went wrong? How could I do it better? These were not questions about finding the idiots in the group and laughing at them. This was about truly trying to do some quality improvement. But the concept of lessons learned is one that, that was 20 years ago. And it's a lesson that has really stuck with me. And I think that kind of speaks to what you said. Like I've done life for 15 years. I've raised 3 kids. I've moved 7 times. I've done all this stuff while my husband was redeployed and at work and not available for whatever reason. I've done stuff and that should account for something. And that's not a matter of just saying, look at me, you owe me. But this is legitimate decision-making adult things that do transfer. It never ceases to amaze me when we do projects, and I've been in project management for 20 years, that I go sit down with a client and I ask them questions and they can't make decisions. And sometimes that's just because you're in the weeds. You're so in the middle of things, like you can't see the forest for the trees. Like I can't, I'm down here and I see all these things, but I don't know how to summarize, therefore, to make a decision. But the nature of both veterans and military spouses is you don't really have the luxury of using the weeds as an excuse. Like, you're going to move and you're going to do it on this date, and you better find a way to get the moving company here. And don't forget the cat. Right? We'll get that story later. But all these things that go into those orders, for lack of a better term, that just come down and you have to respond to them. So yeah, that's a great statement. Again, you mentioned earlier that tech moves really fast, and that's a true statement. So once I've often said when you come into the Salesforce space, it's like getting on a train that does not stop. You somewhat become a passenger of where it takes you. But once you're on the train, that train's got a lot of cars. It's got a lot of options. Like if you don't want to be in the weeds technical all the time, there's options. If you like marketing, there's options. If you just want to be a nerd who stays in a closet and does config and doesn't really deal with people, there's options for those things. So your personality, style, and the sum of your experiences can be translated in a lot of ways.
Yes.
That said, you're coming up on 3 years in this space. If you look back to that conversation in DC that led you to hiring our heroes, is there a piece of advice that you would give yourself? Things that you did, you wish you'd done different, or things you didn't do that you would do? And take into account maybe that times have changed. Like, what are things you know now that you didn't know then? Like, man, that'd be a great piece of advice for somebody that's about to take on this journey.
And I remember thinking this at the time and squashing this thought a little bit, but I think it's important to understand that investing in yourself isn't selfish. It's strategic, that you don't have to wait until the next PCS to start getting ready to follow your goals. So it's really important to make that investment in yourself. I think it's important also to remember that there are more opportunities than you realize. It's very easy to exist in this bubble of Googling and not finding anything and then kind of giving up, and just understanding that there are resources available out there to help, like the ones I mentioned. And, even with hiring our heroes, I know the fellowship has changed slightly, but there are still so many resources available through that. The Amplify conferences that they run, for example, for hiring support and advice, those are massively important. So that I think would have been really a big boost to my confidence at the time. There are people that see you, they understand the challenges, and they believe in you. And, don't doubt yourself, and understand that those skills that you have, the ones that we talked about a minute ago, there is a way to translate those into marketable skills. And you may not have come from tech. I had a slightly technical background, but you may not have come from that. It doesn't really matter, because the really important skills, the ones that really matter, those can't be taught. You already have that stuff. So the technical side, you can learn that. It's the other side. Those are the things you can't teach.
We talk about that a lot in consulting. It's the soft skills. I think the hard skills are what you mean. That's an admin cert. That's a degree in accounting. Those are the tangible paper things that we tout and our parents hang on the refrigerator and that kind of stuff. But the soft skills, and I would say in consulting, that has probably done more to change my career than anything, is an empathetic ear, the ability to listen and decipher and make decisions, the ability to summarize, and how, God, that AI is changing all of this.
Yeah.
AI is not just artificial nonsense that gets spewed every time I go to a website. This can actually be one of the tools in my toolbox that I help go through this. So I've become a fan of this just as I'm trying to summarize things. Is I'll just open Word and say, I'll dictate and I'll have it record what I'm saying. And then I'll take it and go into AI tool and say, give me an outline summary of what I just came up with. That's one way to do an elevator pitch.
Oh my gosh.
How do I take 15 years of 5 moves, 3 kids, and whatever, and get it into a 3-minute story that I can tell on an elevator? That's not an easy thing to do. So AI is really good at cutting through the emotions of, well, I don't want to forget about this kid, and I don't want to forget about that move, right? That's not what you're trying to do in an elevator pitch, right? You're trying to highlight the things that you are, that bring value to any company that's willing to take a chance and open the door. So again, try to find a way to leverage those tools that are out there to your benefit.
Mm-hmm.
Good stuff. If there's a military spouse out there who feels like their career ambitions have been put on hold, I know a lot of times people get married 18, 19 years old. Like, you really don't even know what's in the world. You just have these dreams, and now you're married, and now you're a passenger on this train, and you're not really sure when you're going to get off. Is this a 4-year thing? Is this a 30-year thing? And you're trying.
Even when you're in a 20-year thing, you don't know if that's the end.
Good point. But so you don't want to slam the door on your dreams, but you also have to have a different perspective about them. What would you share to a military spouse that's having those feelings? How do they, I think we've talked a little bit about looking at the resources, evaluating things. We're talking mainly about the Salesforce space, because this is one decision to choose Salesforce that has 98 options on the back side of it. It's not just a technical space. But that said, how do you get past that fear and just click on and take that first step?
Yeah, I have been thinking a little bit about this. I knew we were going to have this conversation, and, just really thinking about, if I had that coffee that I talked about with that other military spouse, what would I have told her now that I'm here? And I think the biggest message is that you aren't behind. Stop panicking. You are building. All of those PCS moves, the resume gaps, the volunteering roles, the times where you spent holding it all together, those weren't pauses. They were, I guess, they're preparation for where you are going to be. And they taught you how to adapt quickly, how to communicate across cultures, how to lead without a title, how to solve problems with creativity. And it's easy to feel like you are playing catch up, or that you have to apologize for that winding path that your career has taken. But the fact is that you bring a depth of experience that no linear career path could provide. And, just trust that your story isn't just valid, it's valuable. And the skills that you have are valuable. And I am confident that the right opportunities will see that for you.
Good stuff. Yeah. And to validate that, I've got a friend whose daughter got her undergrad and is going on to medical school. And I remember this was a kid who excelled at everything in high school. And when she was filling out applications, he told me, he's like, a 4.0 or greater GPA doesn't even mean anything on a college application anymore. There's almost more focus on your extracurricular, your sports, your volunteer stuff. Companies realize anybody can pass a test, but if you don't have applicable skills to kind of hit the ground running, and I think this is something in the American culture probably that's a little different than some other places around the world, that it's just a fast moving thing. And I don't say that as a place of fear. I mean, the things that you mentioned, the adaptability, like that word alone should be a whole volume of encyclopedias of what that means to careers. It's really, really important. And I will say, looking across the landscape of mill spouses that we have here, you guys are the calmest under pressure of anybody that we've worked with. We're all a little bit type A, but that adaptability is just absolutely invaluable.
Yeah.
I want to bring up a couple of words that are pretty common in our ecosystem, and it's a story we'll probably tell over and over in this podcast series because it means something a little different to everybody. Imposter syndrome. And I've had my own recollections. I think doing this podcast is making me have dreams about some of this, but I had an epiphany about these two words the other day. But you and I have talked about this in the past. We talked about it when you got here, and you got here not long after I did. So I was still finding my way in consulting. I knew Salesforce, but I had not done consulting. So we were figuring some of that stuff out together. But what are those words when I say them? What does that conjure up in your mind? Did you have it? Do you have it? And if so, how do you overcome it or get around it?
Yes. And yes, I think that it's really common. And I think that when you're going through this process, and even when you get that certification and you find someone or find an employer that says, yeah, we really want you, there's part of you that is thinking, when are they going to find out? I don't know what I'm doing. But I think there are a lot of negative connotations with imposter syndrome. And it's a real thing. It's really scary. You sit in meetings and you think, oh my gosh, I think everybody knows more than me. But the thing is with imposter syndrome, I think, there's a recognition there that I have so much to learn. I don't think that that's ever a bad thing. I think that when you exist in a space where you are surrounded by people that are supportive and ready to impart knowledge and you are ready to receive, that means growth. And so in that sense, yes, I still suffer from imposter syndrome. There are so many people that know so much more than I ever will, likely. But number one, I am always ready to learn. And so that's a big part of imposter syndrome as well. And number two, I'm not afraid to ask. And I think that that's a testament also to, I have some pretty great colleagues here. So I have some I work with some pretty great people that are already always ready to answer questions, but not being afraid to say, you know what, I am going to find out. I don't know that. And I think that it just all is a testament for your quest for knowledge.
Agreed.
Yeah, imposter syndrome is real, but I don't think it's always a bad thing. I think it just means that you're ready to grow.
Yeah, the epiphany I had about it was, you think of any other career out there, from a pilot to airline mechanic to car mechanic, whatever. How many jobs do you get into where everybody goes to your desk, you do your job, and you don't really know how you measure up, right? Like you get on that train and you show up at work and you do this thing for however many years, and you never really know how you're comparing or how you're being measured, other than, did I get a raise this year or not? With Salesforce, the people in this ecosystem defy logic. I've been around consultants of one kind or the other for 25 years. I always thought of them as like a lawyer you had on retainer. Like, I call them the meter's turning. It's going to get really expensive really quick. For whatever reason, people in this space, like, there's actually a community you can go out and just post a question to whoever, right? The millions of admins that have 20, 30 years in this world, in this space, and they answer for free. Like, it's strange because they're consultants too, but they're giving me some experience for free.
And not just that, they're enthusiastic about imparting that knowledge as well. And there's an enjoyment, with bringing up those people around you. And it's very unique. It's a very unique community to exist in, I have to say.
Yeah. So I don't think it's fair to measure people in this space by what they don't know. I think to your point, let's measure people by their interest in learning. And it's a great, great thing to be on that train and get to learn, even for us old guys. So Danielle, remarkable story. I thank you very much for taking the time. You and I have tried to water down how we take 3 years of these stories and summarize it again. There's a lot to be said here.
Yeah.
But before we go, is there any one piece of advice you want to throw out to somebody who's their spouse is just put in papers? They're looking to get out in the next year. They're about to start this journey. Salesforce is a word that maybe they never heard before this podcast, but they've heard it now. What's one thing you would tell them to do to get the ball rolling?
Oh my gosh. Well, I would tell them that you know more than you think you do. Have some confidence in knowing that. Just lead with your story and be proud of it. The other thing is go ahead and just dip a toe into Trailhead and just, see what you think and start playing around and see what interests you. Use the resources that are available to you. They are ready and they are waiting and they are ready to cheer you on the whole way. So just don't be afraid to make that jump. You just can end up somewhere pretty special.
Great advice. You can go do Trailhead. Nobody has to know, right? No elevator pitch required. Fantastic. Danielle, thank you so much. Always great to talk to you. I really appreciate you taking the time and share your journey. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day.
Thanks, Greg. Bye.
Yeah. And that concludes today's episode of Serious Talk, the Military Minute. On behalf of Serious Solutions, we would like to extend our sincere appreciation to the entire veteran and military spouse community for your unwavering commitment and sacrifice. Remember, your military experience has equipped you with exceptional skills that the Salesforce ecosystem needs. Join us next time as we continue to explore pathways to success in the Salesforce space. If you know a veteran on the verge of separating from the military, or a military spouse considering Salesforce as a career, please share this episode with them. If you enjoyed the material, please give us a 5-star review on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Please subscribe on YouTube so that you can be alerted to new content. We greatly appreciate all of your support. Please see the show notes for links to learn more about Serious Solutions and other programs discussed in this episode. I want to extend a special thanks to Jason Fowler for allowing use of his song, Mystery Road. Until next time, this is Greg Banks signing off.